As of 7:17 p.m. ngayong May 9, nangunguna po, ulitin natin, 3.20 unofficial partial results. Marcos Bongbong, 958,219. Robredo Leni, 409,608. Pacquiao Manny, 79,668. Domagoso, CM, sa mga BCM. Ayan. Okay, mga updates. Sa presidential race,
okay,
36.98.
So close to 37%. Close to 37% na ito ng ERs.
Nangunguna si Marcos Bongbong, 12,065,875. Number 2, Leni Robredo, 5,756,125. Manny Pacquiao, 957,851.
Number 4, si Isko Moreno Domagoso, 874,188. Senator Ping Lacson, 400.
Return. So malayo pa. Hindi natin alam kung saan nanggaling itong mga boto ito, kung anong riyon, kung kanino mga bailiwick, ng mga riyon. So patuloy ang ating pagbo-monitor.
All right, now it's 46.92% of the election returns. Konti na lang, kalahati na po ito ng election returns. Bongbong Marcos is number 1 at 15,339,878. Vice President Leni Robredo, 7,288,834. Manny Pacquiao at number 3, 1,262,192.
Number 4, Isko Moreno Domagoso, 1,063,656. Ping Lacson, 505,265. Yan po ang unang
yung top
5 sa pagka-presidente. Saang mga baluarte yung papasok, kung kanino.
Okay. Now
okay.
it is
832.
53.5% na po ito ng mga boto. What does that mean? Mahigit po sa 30 milyong boto na po ang nabibilang sa ngayon election returns partial. So right now,
mahigit kalahati.
Oo, mahigit na sa kalahati.
Botante.
Bongbong Marcos at 17,541,799. Nalampasan na po ni Marcos Jr. ang bilang ni Duterte nung siya'y nanalo bilang Pangulo noong 2016. Leni Robredo at 8,311,501. Manny Pacquiao, number 3, pero malaki po ang agwat at 1,486,592.
Pero
in a couple of days when they start arriving physically in Congress. Not only is this partial and unofficial, but there is no canvassing done on the presidential race and vice presidential race by the COMELEC. They're just recording it because it's Congress that does it.
Yeah. So in the meantime, of course, when we look at the, I guess the lead, or at least the margins by which the leading candidates have taken against their rivals, there doesn't seem to be any statistical probability as of this time that they could still catch up with the front runner.
They'll have to make that decision, right? Because they are the ones. I mean, the campaign knows whether where their votes are coming from. Remember, a campaign is not just about the likelihood of voters, but which voters were you able to bring to the polls. So I'm not a statistician and I'm not in any of the campaigns. I won't be able to make that judgment for them.
At 102 naman na SD card ang kailangan din ng replacement. So base sa report na binigay ng PPCRV kanina, dumami ang BCM na kailangan palitan. Mula 51 kaninang 11 a.m. na naging 200 na yung BCM na kinailangan palitan. Sinabi rin ni PPCRV IT Director William Yu na malamang magkakaroon ng delay sa paglabas ng resulta, lalo na din sa mga areas na affected ng mga malfunctioning VCMs, lalo na yung mga kailangan palitan. Actually, sinabi nila, nangako sila na yung mga voting precinct volunteers ng PPCRV ay mananatili sa lahat ng mga precincts na nagkaroon ng malfunctioning VCM hanggat dumating ang mga replacement VCM para masigurado na may pasok yung mga balota na naiwan ng mga voters doon. Also, actually, 9:30 na ngayon, sinabi rin ng PPCRV na dapat ngayon dumarating na yung mga physical election returns, yung 4th copy.
Nagbabalik po ang ating marathon coverage sa halalan 2022. Kampo ni Bongbong Marcos Jr. nakatutok na sa unti-unting pagpasok ng resulta ng halalan. Kuha nga po tayo ng detalye mula kay Ina Reformina. Ina, kumusta ang mood dyan, Ina?
Yes.
Pag may bago, babalikan ka namin, ha. Maraming salamat. Ina Reformina. Tingnan nga natin, baka may bagong pasok na resulta.
Ayan.
Partial and unofficial, batay po sa Comelec Transparency Server. Sa presidential race, 63.77% of the election returns counted as of 9:17 p.m. Nangunguna pa rin, Bongbong Marcos, 20,978,083. Leni Robredo, 9,921,820. Manny Pacquiao, 1,879,407. Isko Moreno Dumagoso, 1,378,744. Ping Lacson, panglima, 660,178. Ang bagsak,
Oo,
ano?
isang bagsak na parang, ha? Tapos yung last na binasa natin, partner, 20 million na. Oo, 9 yung kalaban. So bakit ang tanong lagi ng mga tao, syempre, hindi naman duda, kung di, talaga, umabot ng ganung kalaki yung lamang.
Oo nga. Pero yung mga surveys, 'di ba, na lumabas, lalo na of course yung reputable survey firms, no, may ganung anong tawag dito? May ganung sense yung nalabas ng mga surveys, no? So, doon sa mga talagang nagsumubaybay ng survey, syempre, siguro hindi na sila na surprise. Ngunit, syempre, pag nakita mo talaga yung numero, talagang tas ganun kabilis, kakaboto mo palang ilang oras ago, di ba? Tas pag nakita mo, maaano ka talaga, no? Mabibigla ka.
Loob ng 8 hanggang 12 oras. Sinuri naman ng mga technician ng VCM at ang scanner daw nito ang nagkaproblema at hindi ito maayos agad-agad. Kaya ang mga botante ay binigyan ng 3 options. Una, mag-manual voting o yung sasagutan na ang balota at ipagkakatiwala na lang ito sa election officers at watchers. Wala nga lang silang resibo. May mahigit 200 ang pumayag sa option na yan at umuwi na. Ikalawang option ay hintayin dumating ang kapalit na VCM at ikatlo, hintayin may matapos na presinto at ang VCM nila ang gagamitin. Marami ang matyagang naghintay hanggang sa dumating ang kapalit na VCM bandang 6:30 na kanina. 30 minuto na lang bago mag alas 7. Pero hindi agad natapos ang problema. Nagkagulo pa sa kung paano gagawin ang pagpapapasok sa presinto. Naging 2 kasi ang pila kanina. Isa para sa manual voting at isa para sa mga willing to wait. Ang nais mangyari ng election officers, magsalitan mula sa magkabilang pila, kaya nagalit ang mga mas matagal nang nakapila. So ang ending, ang mga pumila sa manual voting kanina ay pinabalik na lang sa dati nilang pwesto, kaya ang pila ay umabot sa kabilang bahagi ng gusali. Minauna na lang nila ang senior citizens. Sa ngayon ay may mga ilang botante pa na nasa loob ng presinto.
Ibig mo sabihin, Jean, tamad ang mga botante?
Kasi 12 eh. 12 ang iboboto. So, hindi naman lahat may panahon para ano ba to, sino ba to, alam mo, ano bang ginawa nito. I mean, di ba, ganun talaga. At wala namang partido na nag-educate sa atin tungkol doon, di ba? Wala rin namang incentive sa kanila para sabihin nila yung mga plataforma nila. Dahil alam naman nilang ganun talaga bumoto yung mga tao.
Pero alam mo, may mga kilala din doon na hindi napasok doon, the likes of Gordon, yun, kilala yan, re-electionist yan. The likes of De Lima, kilala din yan, kahit paano. And even sina Attorney Harry Roque ba nandun ba? Hindi ko na
Bumaba eh.
Bumaba. O,
Bumaba.
kilala
Pero
din
nandun.
yun.
Nakita
Eh,
sa-
nung
sa
panahon
20.
spokesman nun, araw-araw nasa
Correct.
TV yun. Hindi
Tama,
ba?
tama.
So it appears parang hindi lang din alitan nga sila. Ang bago yan, Pinoy and Binay. Hindi rin magkapareho. Bago yan,
Si Noli and Gloria lang yata.
si Kabayan, yun, magkatandem.
Magkatandem.
Pero prior to that, hindi rin ha. Sino bang prior to that? Si
FDR?
FVR and ERAP. Oo, hindi rin magkasama yon. Hindi kaya gusto na ng sambayanan na wag na magbangayan ng presidente at vice-presidente. Kaya pareho nating ihalal yan, yung tandem na yan.
Hindi. Sa palagay ko, for as long as our system allows it, na magkaiba ng tandem, pwedeng iboto.
Bahala na sa inyo yung NPAC para patawag kayo. Kasi paulit-ulit na ito na pinabanggit sa inyo before election, at saka lalo na ngayong election day, pero hindi ko alam kung saan nyo dadalhin yung fourth copy ng election return na hindi namin makukuha para sa aming pong unofficial parallel count. Pinaghandaan namin ito, ginastosan, and yet...
Latest partial at unofficial results para sa pagka-presidente as of, kasi kanina mga pasado alas 9 na yung nakalagay, as of 11:02 p.m., 77.32% of election returns counted. Again, partial and unofficial based on the Comelec Transparency Server. Nangunguna, Bongbong Marcos, 25,051,855. Ang lamang po, mga labing tatlong milyon sa na pumapangalawang si Leni Robredo na merong 11,925,131. Pangatlo, Senador Manny Pacquiao, 2,484,310. Number
The waiting game is on as the Philippine Commission on Elections begins tallying ballots from millions of Filipino voters here and around the globe. Hi, I'm Lexi Schultz.
And I'm TJ Manotok. Welcome to day 2 of ANC's special coverage of the 2022 Philippine elections. Join us as we bring you the latest election results and updates from our bureaus across the world. Let's kick things off with a look at the latest and partial results from the Comelec's Transparency Server. In the presidential race, we now see former Senator Bongbong Marcos at 25,914,000, followed by Vice President Leni Robredo with 12,361,000 votes, and then Senator Manny Pacquiao at 2.6 million, Manila Mayor Isko Moreno Domagoso at 1.6 million, and Senator Ping Lacson at 773,000.
Leading in the mayoral race is Honey Lacuna with 491,537 votes, followed by Alex Lopez with 152,909 votes. Trailing behind them is former Congressman Amado Bagatsing at 104,779 votes. For the vice mayoral race, former actor Yul Servo is leading at 535,826 votes. He's followed by actor Raymond Bagatsing at 166,751 votes. It's also worth noting that presidential candidate former Senator Bongbong Marcos is leading in Manila at 328,509 votes. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno is behind him at 274,040 votes, while Vice President Leni Robredo is at 180,864 votes. Manila has 1,859 clustered precincts where 84 vote counting machines bogged down. Some had problems with SD cards. However, canvassers gave assurances that all these votes, while delayed, will be counted. And that's the latest here in the Manila City Hall.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Nico.
With us because of their belief in our message of unity, because of their belief in the candidates sa tambalang Marcos at saka Duterte. Bukod pa doon, ay magpapasalamat ako sa mga kababayan ko na nandiyan sila at nagsuporta sila hindi lamang sa mga kandidato, hindi lamang sa aming partido, kung hindi sa magandang bukas ng ating minamahal na Pilipinas. Hindi pa tapos ang bilangan. Marami nang nagsasabi na tapos na, pero hindi pa talaga. Antayin natin hanggang talagang maliwanag na maliwanag, mag 100% ng pagbilang. Ngunit kahit hindi pa tapos nga ang pagbibilang, hindi makapag-antay ang aking pasasalamat sa inyo lahat.
Meanwhile, supporters of Vice President Leni Robredo in her hometown of Naga gathered at the City Plaza as the partial unofficial results show former Senator Bongbong Marcos Jr. with a wide lead right now. Our correspondent, Wena Cos, joined us from there for an update. Wena, go ahead.
Yes, TJ, 4 hours after polling precincts closed as the partial and unofficial results of the May 9 polls came in, Bicolanos gathered at the Naga City 15 Martires Plaza on Monday night to sing together and offer prayers. The atmosphere is tense as the crowd sang People Power Revolution anthem Bayan Ko and Rosas, one of the songs attached to Vice President Leni Robredo's campaign, between defiant chants of Robredo's name. During this time when they began to gather at around 11 p.m., Robredo's rival, Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., led the polls with over 25 million votes.
Using a platform like Amazon for e-commerce is part of our lives. So those systems are just part of our lives, just like water or power, I would argue. Similar, but different, of course. So a public utility-based model would say, hey, this is a private company, but its services we need to ensure it does not discriminate or create harms for the public. That's a whole other model. It's kind of a consumer safety, public safety type of approach. And I think that's a much more feasible approach to ensure that these guys are accountable to some sort of set of norms. And we're going to see the effects of this right now with this election right now that's occurring that you all are reporting on. So that's why we really need to protect people and protect democracies and protect some balance in our world. A regulatory approach is critical. And that can be done in a collaborative way. We don't have to focus on merely critiquing, but actually looking at how we can get everything better.
Well, before I toss
Dr.
you,
Mish,
go ahead, TJ, go ahead.
Lexi. Yeah, I just wanted to jump on that concept of treating it as a utility. I'm trying to understand this so that I could as well make the audience understand. Can I give an example of a water utility and provide the water? And if a bad actor tries to pollute the water, you're trying to say that the government should also hold the water utility accountable for allowing whatever polluted stuff to get in the water. Is that kind of a somewhat of analogy?
Imagine if the water utility doesn't serve certain areas, right?
Okay,
or that systematically the upkeep of the infrastructure is very poor, as we see occur in the U.S., in poor working class communities. Or we saw when there was a huge blizzard in Houston that only the grid went down for the poorer communities, but the wealthier communities were able to siphon off the power. So it's the actions. The actions have to be serving the public. That's the point. That's the litmus test.
Well, I did come across an article of Bloomberg. Nobel laureate Maria Ressa was saying that this presidential election will have repercussions to other elections coming up as well.
To promote his book, a very fascinating book. Your social media, where can they find you? If you want to learn more about what you shared yesterday. I feel like Lexi and I just sat in a lecture in UCLA today.
I would love it. I mean, and I want to keep hanging out and being back on. And now I have great friends in the Philippines and you here, TJ. You can follow me on Twitter at Ramesh Media, RAMESHMEDIA, and you'll notice I don't tweet very much. Perhaps that's part of what we're talking about. And my last book, I've written a few. My last book was called Beyond the Valley, and that's a book that really gives a blueprint for how has tech come to take over our lives, and not necessarily in a negative way, but also looking at a lot of alternatives where different technologies, AI technologies, machine learning systems, digital networks of all kinds serve people and
The only tally we have is the number of barangays that have fully transmitted their votes. As of now, 17 out of 30 barangays in Pasig have fully transmitted their votes, while 13 more barangays have only partially transmitted the votes. COMELEC officials say they still do not know the cause of delay and that they will only release the results once they have concluded their canvassing. Pasig ranks 8th in the Philippines and 5th in NCR among the vote-rich cities with more than 457,000 registered voters. Running for mayor is Mayor Vico Soto, who is seeking second term for City Hall. He won last midterm elections, breaking the almost 3-decade rule of the Eusebio dynasty in Pasig. His running mate is former basketball player and Pasig Congressman Robert Dodo Jaworski Jr. Soto's opponent in the mayoral race is no other than incumbent Vice Mayor Christian Iyo Bernardo, who ran unopposed for Vice Mayor in 2019 with former Pasig City Mayor Bobby Eusebio as his partner. His running mate is Christian Sia, a lawyer and Pasig City Councilor. Last March, Vice Mayor Iyo filed a cyber libel complaint against Mayor Vico for accusing him of not doing his duties as mayor in a flag ceremony in January.
Distance yourself from, of course, President Duterte. In many ways, from some of the policies that have turned off these international investors, he now has to move towards his own personality and his own policies, which are going to be different. He has to underscore that, reinforce that messaging, so that international investors are again attracted to the Philippines. And if Vice President Sara Duterte is not in agreement with that, then he will have to be firm about that distancing and that messaging that he has to project to gain back the confidence of the international community.
Well, Professor Jay, do you feel that it may be a small help that to the end, President Duterte did not endorse Bongbong Marcos as his president, and even with his daughter being the vice president of Bongbong Marcos, I mean, she also sort of she's marching to the beat of her own.
Major and minor glitches marred the country's 5th automated election. An hour before the polls, the COMELEC conceded there were still glitches in the mandatory final testing and sealing of the vote counting machines. 47 precincts in the BARM didn't finish on time, as well as 1 precinct in Socorro Oriental, Mindoro, and another in Silvino Lobos, Northern Samar. In Cotabato City, electoral boards had to be replaced by trained PNP personnel. COMELEC Chairman Saidamen Pangarungan witnessed an orderly start to voting in one Pasay City precinct. By 7 a.m., 2 precincts in Maging, Lanao del Sur failed to start on time because ballots from 2 precincts got mixed up. Voting in Cotabato City was also delayed because electoral boards from the PNP for 14 precincts were still getting paraphernalia. The PNP had to be deployed as electoral boards for 175 precincts because the original boards refused to serve due to security concerns. Power in Bukidnon was intermittent, which was addressed by the DOE. As time passed, more glitches were reported. Close to 2,000 glitches were reported to the COMELEC through the machines, though the machines hurdled the FTS.
Initial reactions when you saw the results, though yet it is unofficial?
Yeah, obviously it tracks with the polls obviously as academics working with a lot of journalists and fact checkers, many of my colleagues have attributed some of the most aggressive kinds of attack campaigns to their campaign, right? And so that to me triggers some kind of an existential crisis, right? So we academics, journalists, we stand for truth. We invest a lot in fact checking and voter education. So this is also a time for us to pause. What have we been doing wrong? Where the regulation moving forward under the front runner Bongbong Marcos's regime? What could we anticipate, right? In different democracies and also illiberal democracies around the world, there's challenging new legislation where social media content is being dictated on by the government. And I think that leads towards censorship. And of course, the Philippines, we have direct experience of censorship under martial law. We don't want that to happen, right? So we don't want social media content policy to be dictated by our lawmakers and politicians, because as we have seen, right, in 2022, the people behind disinformation campaigns are politicians themselves. So what we need are more civil society bottom-up interventions that could be guiding platforms around some of these decisions. And I think platforms need to be treading carefully.
The embassy expects the Toronto consulate to finish last due to the many number of registered voters there. And as of 1:50 p.m. Eastern Time, with only 2 precincts left, the partial results here in Ottawa have Bongbong Marcos currently leading with over half of the votes at 1,707 votes, and Leni Robredo in second at 661. For Vice President, Sara Duterte is leading at 1,762, and Kiko Pangilinan at 568. With 49 total number of precincts in Canada and the total number of registered voters at 90,729, the embassy expects a printout of consolidated results by Wednesday afternoon. And that's the latest from Ottawa.
Under the Duterte administration, so I would say it's the height of irony for him to be declaring a Press Freedom Day. And I would add at the end that all of these attacks are taking place in an environment where there is physical violence against journalists, but also impunity for attacks on journalists, which means that those responsible are not being held to account. And it really makes journalists vulnerable, those who are targets, for example, in these online attacks and smear campaigns, vulnerable to physical attacks themselves.
Continue pa rin yung investigation natin.
In Basilan, COMELEC reported a group of men snatching ballots from a polling precinct in Tipo-Tipo Central School. Another group tried to snatch the other ballots but was prevented by security forces. But indelible ink was poured over the ballots during the commotion, which made the ballots useless. Another ballot snatching incident was prevented by army personnel after they fired warning shots, which prompted the perpetrators to throw the ballots in the mud before escaping. The poll officials in Basilan is looking into the possibility of recommending to COMELEC and Bank the declaration of failure of elections in Tipo-Tipo. Over in Leyte, 2 men were arrested for pointing their guns at a village official who was manning a checkpoint in Hilongos municipality on Monday.
Welcome back to ANC's special coverage of the 2022 Philippine elections. Let's now go back to TJ in Washington, D.C., where he is joined by Philippine Ambassador to the U.S., Jose Manuel Romualdez.
Thanks, Lexi. Right now, I cross the street now to the main building of the Philippine Embassy and get another chance to chat with Ambassador Romualdez. Thank you so much for your time, Ambassador. I know it's a very busy time for everybody in the embassy and all your contacts. But first of all, I guess, 6 years of a new presidency in the Philippines, and as I'm sure they're as well hoping better, continued improved relationships with the U.S.
Well, our democracy has been put in place. I think this election is an election. I know that it is hotly contested to a certain extent. It's consequential to a certain extent also. But what's important is that we have to really see it as a continuing process of making our institutions stronger. Mm-hmm. This country, as you know, is 250 plus years old, and they just recently had almost a major problem last January, January 6th to be exact. Yep. So democracy is something that you cannot just simply take for granted. Agreed. It is something that everyone, all of us, all of those who love our country, have to continue to be there.
Let's begin with the latest unofficial tally from the Election Commission's transparency server. In the presidential race, we have Bongbong Marcos leading the race at 29,795,854. Leni Robredo is in second place, far second at 14,209,221. Fighting Senator Manny Pacquiao is at third place with 3,367,693. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno Dumagoso at fourth place with 1.8 million. Ping Lacson, Senator, at 855,000 is holding 5th place.
That they know these politicians, and that when the family gets well known, it can sort of override that interest. So if voters are somewhat more likely to reject a corrupt politician, but they're a lot more likely to support a politician whose family they know, those two things can essentially clash.
Mm-hmm. And so what will it take, Professor, to end this cycle of political dynasties? If you can't change it at the legislative level?
Campaign. The problem with this kind of results in the transparency server is we actually don't know where it's coming from. So theoretically speaking, if all of these are Marcos bailiwicks and there are places where VP Robredo won, that in fact he could catch up or come close. But it's not likely because the way this works, it's actually quite random.
Rival Rui Elias Lopez, another one of President Rodrigo Duterte's sons, Paulo Duterte, is the congressional front-runner in Davao City's 1st District. Meanwhile, the Marcoses will most likely continue their rule in Ilocos Norte. Bongbong Marcos' son Sandro is leading in his bid to become 1st District Representative with 108,000 votes against Ria Fariñas. The son of Senator Amy Marcos, Matthew Manotoc, is also poised to retain his seat as Ilocos Norte governor.
Select few interviews. It's a very safe, insistently safe, kind of even boring campaign on the surface. But a lot of the creativity happened online. So a lot of the brand rehabilitation happened online. So that could not have happened without social media. This is a long-term project. It's been very patient and also very creative. It involved a lot of influencers, amateur video production, YouTube channels, the works.
Michael Villegas when he arrived at Bagong Silang Elementary School in Caloocan City to cast his vote. Michael is paralyzed from the waist down. Instead of a wheelchair, he uses an old skateboard to move around. He pushed himself to the PPCRB booth and asked for help in finding his voting precinct. He later found out that his precinct was in another school, but that did not stop him from literally pushing himself to vote.
In the mainstream media station, as well as inserted in the curriculum of elementary and high school. It should start that way, and the reason for that is that if we focus on the economy.
Loud minority that voted for candidates other than Marcos. That's a quick answer is yes. Correct, Professor?
Yes, absolutely.